Alright guys, so here's something. We have a new legendary shard summoning fusion starting in less than 24 hours, and literally no one's talking about it. I kind of don't understand why. The hero's a little basic. We're going to do a full breakdown of Seline, our new fusion hero, in this video, but for young accounts she'll be very helpful, and for people with Giselle, this passive over here is very, very intriguing. How good is she going to be? Is she going to be like Helga level good for a fusion? Is she going to be Alistair? Absolutely freaking not even close, but she's not the worst here in the game like I'm hearing some people say. She will have viability, especially on those younger accounts, and I gotta make a video on this. I mean, no one's talking about her, and she's our brand new fusion hero that everyone's gonna get for free. The fusion's looking very, very easy. I do have to say though, there's not a calendar. Unless I'm blind as a bat, I looked everywhere in game right now. I do not see a calendar anywhere. So I kind of feel like Moonton's sleeping on this chick as well. Are you guys excited for her? Can I get you excited for her? Let's find out. Let's get into it. Let's talk Seline. We'll do a quick full kit breakdown. I will do a lot of hero comparisons to other fighters so you can really get a sense of how she fits into the game. Seline, vampire chick, looks pretty cool. Let's get into it.
Fastidious.
Fastidious.
Alrighty, my friends, I'm going to take you through this quickly, but talent, every single skill, all the awakenings. But first, I just want to ground this chick in the reality of the game. What is she? She is an esotericist and a fighter. That is a thing we see. You know, we've got Helga, we've got Thalon, stuff like that. Yankar, I guess. There's a handful. But really, when it comes to fighters, you want them to be nightmare units, or one day, if we're lucky, they're going to start pumping out more infernal fighter units like Xena, who's coming, and then obviously Zila 2, who's a total queen. But it really is, you know, we get some Northerners, we get some esotericists, occasionally some other factions, but typically you want them to be in the nightmare faction so they can really get advantage of that nice attack speed buff. They synergize really, really well. Esotericists, it's interesting, but especially when you see the kit, I don't think it's the perfect match for her. I also don't really think it fits the theme. I guess the whole point of Esoteria is it's like random weird stuff, but like she's a vampire fighter chick. So is Giselle. Why can't she be a nightmare unit or something like that? It just doesn't make sense to me. She's this spooky, evil, Halloween-y thing. Let's talk about what she's like. She has 2 tiles of range. We can see her range right here. You can see it is the same thing on her auto ultimate. 2 tiles of range, always a good thing. As we've gotten more and more content in this game, when you only have the 1 tile of range, it really limits what that hero is capable of. This also makes her excellent for progression. So just being on a young account, throwing her behind an Olog or whatever tank you're using, it's just easy, and it's going to help a lot of newer players. So any newer player, you will be able to get her. If you're coming from other games where you think fusions are hard, maybe, they are not hard in this game. As long as you're playing every day a little bit, you will get her, so it will be mindless, 100% free. Aside from that, we got the 2 tiles range. When it comes to the keywords, they're just saying she's a magic fighter. She does magic DPS. That is her thing. If you do not have her passive unlocked, Vampiric Sting, which you get by getting Giselle the Eternal Duelist, there is nothing else in this kit that isn't DPS. It's only damage. There's no other buffs, no other debuff. She does put out a mark, but all that mark does is damage. All her kit is damage. It's very, very simple. The number one comparison I would like to use, especially if you do not get Giselle, so you don't get this cool passive over here, is going to be Salazar. She kind of stacks up as a magic version of Salazar. I do think she falls short in a couple ways. But let's talk about a way she's better. Salazar has 1 tile range. I will say during his ultimate, he gets this nice diamond thing like Constance or Dolores, but typically he's just 1 tile range, which does limit Salazar. And that is what has caused him from dropping from his high grace of probably when I started playing the game, when the game came out, the best fighter in the game or the second best fighter in the game once Arrogance came out, to a good nightmare fighter that can really help like a certain guild boss 2 team or something, but he's not the same superstar he once was. He is limited by that range. She is not, but they're very similar. They put out these sextuple hitters, these 6x hitters during their ultimate with pretty solid damage. A key thing with Salazar though, is he does this big bursty range. Let me go find him for you. His ultimate has this nice diamond of range, and also because it has the condition that it will be randomly on all targets in range, if he does kill one target, he just moves on to the next. Seline is single target. So if she kills the target she's using her 6 strikes on, she does not move on and just eliminate a whole bunch like Salazar does. Salazar, a very well-built one, it almost has an AoE quality to this, which Seline will not benefit from. If you see here, this goes down to 900 skill costs. Seline, you will see her ult goes down to 300. Obviously, it can go even lower if you run her with an Esotericist Lord. For example, a legendary Lord like Cyrus or Venoma would bring that skill cost down to 225 rage. Very cheap, so she can spam it a bunch. But Seline at max skill ups total is putting out 800% DPS worth of damage from her multipliers. Salazar here at max skill ups is putting out 1,880. It's worth mentioning, this will cost 900 costs, and Seline, even without a Lord, is a third of that, so it kind of evens out fairly well. I would actually say Seline might be a little bit better in that respect. However, she has far lower base attack than Salazar's mighty 6,500 flat. She's at about 4,200. We'll be back there in a second. And on top of that, she doesn't get the big range and she can't move on to the next target. If we look at this ult animation above my head, when Salazar is doing his ult, when he's striking, when he's blasting all these guys around him, he absolutely destroys.
Isn't it just a marvel to watch him strike with such force? Oh, speaking of which, this video is sponsored by Marvel Strike Force. Marvel Strike Force is a free-to-play, team-based RPG that brings players into the Marvel Universe. In this game, you can assemble powerful teams of Marvel characters, both heroes and villains, to take on enemies in different forms of combat. Marvel Strike Force is heavy on its strategic gameplay, and you will find that there are endless combinations for you to try out. Use my link in the description or scan this QR code to get free character giveaways in October, such as Agatha. I am literally only playing one game right now, so I'm looking for other games to pick up, and this seems like it could be a good one. We can recruit superheroes and supervillains from across the multiverse. These include classics like Iron Man, Wolverine, Venom, and many more. And if you're a new player like me, you can unlock 17 total characters in your first 30 days, including Spider-Man, Thor, Deadpool, Captain America, and many other of your favorite characters. But still, there's even more. The game is celebrating the spookiest month of the year. You can use my link or this QR code here, and then use the promo code Halloween to get all this free stuff. 100 shards for Zombie Iron Man, 600,000 gold, and 480 L2 training modules. So, if you are keen to try out the game, be sure to use my link or my QR code to download Marvel Strike Force today.
Yeah, so check out Marvel Strike Force. Let me know if you're interested in seeing me play that game. It does look pretty fun, a bit different than games like this. Let's go back to Seline now. So we get a sense of Salazar. That's enough out of him. I guess the final thing is he's getting the bleed as well. That's coming with a dot damage. That's coming with true damage based on the enemy target's max HP. That's coming with increased physical damage taken. It's a pretty nice thing. He also gets some HP from a different bond, but he's basically straight up DPS with the bleed component, and Seline is basically straight up DPS unless you have Giselle. Let us actually talk about this Giselle passive over here, even though it's her last skill, because it lends itself really well to her other really good fighter comparison, I think, or at least that can help you learn a bit more about her. So what does this passive do? Once you have Giselle, the Eternal Duelist, who quite frankly is a pretty terrible unit in this game, one of the very worst legendary heroes. She did just get a buff, so she's a little bit better, especially if you have Seline, but she's not that much better. Seline's better than Giselle, without a doubt. But if and when you pull Giselle, unfortunately, I'm sorry, your Seline does get a pretty major buff. Her ultimate, which like I said has no utility, just a big magic burst that you can spam a lot because it's a very cheap ult cost. You can see down to 300, some nice damage. If you get Giselle, this now will place a 10-second magic damage vulnerability. So this is increased magic damage taken, and it's 30%, making this the single strongest magic damage vulnerability debuff inside the entire game. Full stop. The potency of this vulnerability to begin with is only matched by one other unit in the entire game, so that's the other comparison. In his case, it is physical damage, so not magic, so they do kind of the opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to damage types. But if we can go and find wherever the heck Ares is, he, during his ultimate, can actually have a nice chance, and especially if you build him fast, he'll keep good uptime on a 4-second long that he keeps reapplying, increased physical damage taken 30%, a 30% physical damage vulnerability. In general, though, I would say Ares is a lot better than Seline. It is really cool when you have that 30% magic damage, but a lot of other heroes can get you some amount of magic vulnerability, so you still have the increased magic damage taken, just not to that potency. The highest we can see is like a Twin Fiend or a Soul Cadence can get you up to 25%, or if you want a really cheap and easy way to get it, Mari's giving you consistent 20%, stuff like that. Seline and Ares both have like fine damage. We'll see, maybe Selene's can even scale a little bit better, but the really fun thing with Ares, he's one cost less at 17, actually just like Salazar. Selene's up to 18, which isn't the biggest deal in the world, but he's got very tanky stats. The defense is okay, but the HP is fantastic. He can kind of work as a little bit of DPS, but then a lot of debuffing and then some tankage. That makes him really viable. If we go back to Seline, and now we're gonna go fully forward, focusing just on Seline, but I did want those nice comparisons. If we go back to her and look at those base stats, you can see the HP is 10,000 hit points less. The defense is very nice, it's far higher, so there is a little bit of tankiness in her. She's kind of akin to maybe a Volca, very high defense, good magic res as well, but the attack is way lower than Ares and even further lower than Salazar. That is okay because she's dealing magic damage, so she's dealing with magic resistance as opposed to dealing with defense, so you don't need as much attack. But even for a magic legendary fighter, this isn't super low, but is the lower end, and it doesn't have so much spice to it. Let's very quickly now take you through the skills. I do not want to take too much time on this because it's not that interesting. It's just, hey, she deals DPS this way. Also, she deals DPS this way. So the talent, she has an effect called Throbbing Wound, no comment. Inflicts a mark on the enemy every time the hero deals damage to them. When the enemy has 4 stacks of mark, it kind of bursts as a 100% damage double hitter. This does lead her to having some stackable nice damage over the course of a long fight. You build her pretty fast. Her attack interval is slightly quick for a fighter. The typical attack interval you see is 2.6 seconds. Occasionally we'll see something nice on Arrogance like 2.4. She's the sweet spot, 2.5, right in between. I think Kineza's 2.5 as well. So it's something, it's interesting, but it's not super rapid. But she'll get a lot of marks out if you build her nice and quick, which you should. That's one way to get some extra DPS. Basic attack, insanely basic. Magic damage, 120% at max skill ups. We talked about Swish. I do like how quickly she can ult cycle this. It's one of the fastest ult cycles in the game if you run her with a Lord, especially a legendary Lord, Cyrus Venoma. It goes down to 300 skill costs, but you can reduce that by 25% down to 225 skill costs with that legendary Lord. And she's going to deal damage to an enemy 6 times. It's only one enemy. She can't move to the next one. You can see the animation here above my head. But it's going to be 120% damage on the first 4 hits when you max skill her. So that obviously comes out to 480% over those hits. And then she's getting 2 double hitters of 160. So that's 320 total. So that's how we ended up that number of 800%. 480 plus 320. You can see though, it's so cheap. She can do it a lot. So it can be fairly consistent uptime. It is an auto ult. It's kind of similar to like Wrath, who I think also is a 300 skill cost ultimate. And it's also an auto. It doesn't have like a duration, it's just a burst, so she does go through it a lot. You'll see on these younger accounts, she's going to be a big DPS for you, particularly if you do get Giselle, but a lot of people I do believe will outgrow her. That being said, maybe she'll surprise us, so we'll talk more about this at the end, but if there's specific content you would like to see me showcase her in, just tell me. We'll figure it out for sure. I can get a guide together if I think she's worthy. Worst case, we'll do a showcase. On to the first passive. Basic attacks have a 15% chance at max skill ups. This goes up to 20% to trigger this effect, dealing 150% damage to one target and inflicting 1 stack of mark on enemies around the target. This is interesting because she can stack mark in a way that is not just single target. And you'll see in a second, this allows her to kind of deal some damage outside of range and allow more marks to exist. But, you know, it goes up to 180% damage. It's something, but it's not such a something. The final passive before her Giselle exclusive one, basic attacks and lunge have a 10% chance to apply 2 stacks of mark. So instead of the 1 stack from her basic attacks from her talent, it can now be 2. Instead of the 1 stack AoE that can happen when lunge triggers, it can now be 2. That's really nice, getting closer to 4 stacks on everyone and explodey. That's better. Also, the trigger chance goes up to 20% with skill ups, so that certainly helps. You're twice as likely that it's going to trigger. Now, when Throbbing Wound is triggered, the mark deals damage to enemies bearing the mark regardless of distance. So when you have the 4 stacks on someone, it's going to trigger the damage, even if at that point they're outside of Selene's range. That makes her a little teeny tiny bit interesting, but again, it's such like a beginnery thing. I don't see it really scaling or having use in the later parts of the game. And then finally, the big magic vulnerability, if you get Giselle. She's only a little interesting to me personally, if I'm being totally transparent if you have Giselle. I don't have Giselle. I'm not looking forward to pulling Giselle. I will obviously fuse Seline, because how do you not fuse a 100% free hero? But man, I don't know. Also, I don't know. Let's move to the awakenings. Not that you're going to get so many awakenings unless you want to use your unpolished soul stones, which you should not. Somehow you're able to fuse multiple copies, or they bring her back. I'm sure at some point they'll add her to the hero pool too, which kind of sucks because it's just more mid heroes diluting the pool and making it harder to get your hex or your arrogance or whatever. These awakenings are just not that good. The A1 maybe is the most interesting. The chance to trigger lunge, that passive increases by 10%. So it's 20% with max skill ups. Now it's 30%. So from the base, it's 10%. When you have this A1 and its max skill up, it's 3 times more likely. 3 out of 10 chance. It's something. The A2 plus 15% crit damage. This breaks my heart. Give her plus 300 base attack. It would make her so much more potent. That would scale so much better than the crit damage. But this is something they like to do with the magic DPS. We saw a similar thing on Helga. The A3 now, when she kills an enemy, it gains an effect of ignoring 30% magic res. So essentially that's 30% penetrating damage because she's ignoring her version of defense and she's dealing magic damage. That's magic resistance. It's 10 seconds. It's really nice. This is really for like progression-y stuff though, because I can't imagine where she's killing a lot of units. You know, a good place she can maybe shine, you might be able to put her in Gear Raid 5, aka Gear Dungeon 2, behind the tank in like that middle row in the later stages. She might be able to have enough DPS to do like that hex job, but she's going to be outclassed by a lot of other units, I'm pretty sure. I don't think she's killing enemies a lot, that she's going to trigger this a lot, unless you get her very early on. But if you get her very early on, you're not going to have her A3, I don't think, unless you're the biggest spender ever, or you have ridiculous daily luck on unpolished legendary soul stones. Her A4 plus 2 rage regen attack. We haven't talked about this yet, but this is how much rage she's able to build per basic attack. And it's actually, she's low. The typical thing you'd see on a legendary fighter is 10. So every basic attack is 10, and then that can scale higher with rage regen percentage. For her, it's 8. So this actually just brings her to normal. She doesn't cycle that fast, but I guess that's to counteract the fact that it's such a low cost, especially if you run her with a Lord. I think this is such a fart. I really don't like it. The A5, every time, it says every one time, but it's just every instance she triggers the ultimate, the next ultimate deals an extra 150% damage 3 times. I haven't tested this. I don't know if it means if you can count that triple ultimate as a next ultimate too. It kind of reads like that with the every one time. Otherwise, it'd be every other ultimate. You're getting that triple. It's another 450% damage, so it turns the typical ultimate of 800% damage into 1250% damage, which definitely is something, especially if you can do it every time. That's pretty big. That's pretty bursty. But it's an A5 on a fusion limited hero for now that's not in the hero pool. All in all, this is Seline. You continue to tell by my tone the entire video, she's not that thrilling. She's also not that bad. If you are less than 2 months into the game and you haven't played like insane and spent like insane, she will have a place on your roster, I think. But for perspective, right, on my main account, at least as I see it now, I will do more testing. I see her as useless. Obviously, I'm very deep into the game, but even for perspective on like my day 80 epics only account, not that I could use her because she's legendary, but even if I could, I don't see where I'm using her. I've got a pretty good account. This chick is not an Estrid. She's not even a Wrath, in my opinion. Obviously, those are different kinds of heroes, but if we're just thinking about potent fighters, I guess she serves a purpose on an account like that of just being melee magic DPS. Presumably, she would be able to help that account in Gear Raid 5, I think. But I think she's going to have a potential ceiling that we all hit with how good she can be. I do hope I'm wrong, though. So, guys, if there are places you want to see me show her off, test her out, maybe it's a full guide because we're so into her in the end, you do let me know. Get in the comments, have a say in this. I mean, I'm going to cover her. She's definitely interesting, and I don't understand why she's getting like ignored and getting this really bad rap when she's not that bad. I get the disappointment. She's definitely not that good, but she's something, and we're all going to get her, basically, unless you actively try not to get her, or you're going to be busy and you just won't be playing the game. If you like my stuff, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. We are over 19,000 subscribers. We are on our way to 20,000. The sooner we get there, the sooner I do a big giveaway and we celebrate, and so on and so on. It's very heartwarming. It really makes me happy. So thank you guys so much. Share this thing with your mother. I've been Fastidious. I hope to see you real soon. Goodbye.
Fastidious.